I think when it comes to picking a celebrant, you just need to get that feel that you match. And that goes both ways. You know, you should feel really comfortable with your celebrant. Your celebrant should fit with you, fit with your day, and that whole vibe that you're going for.
This is the Ryan Marketing Show, and you're listening to episode 84 of 100. Today on the show, I have Nichola Nicholson, who is a marriage celebrant, celebrating one of the most important days of our lives and bringing people together for that occasion. Great to have you on the show, Nichola, and great to be here overlooking Hawke's Bay from your place.
Yeah, sunny Napier day for a change. Thanks for having me on. It's exciting to be here.
You are welcome. So let's get underway. First question I have really strikes at the heart of what do you do? What does it take to be an awesome wedding celebrant?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of things it takes to be an awesome celebrant, and I think a lot of people don't realise the kind of ground you cover as a celebrant. So the obvious thing that most people think of is, you know, the person standing up the front on your wedding day talking. Generally, people have memories of celebrants either talking for too long or suddenly mentioning God or forgetting someone's name or something like that. So there's kind of maybe the celebrants of yesteryear. But there's a whole process right from when you get a couple to book in terms of kind of educating them about what their ceremony can be, what their wedding day can be, what you legally have to include, which is very little. Making sure that legal stuff gets covered off, so marriage licenses and witnesses, etc. But telling their story as well and making it awesome. You know, like if you go to a wedding and you sit down and the first thing that kind of happens is a ceremony and you're laughing or crying or, you know, you're kind of getting goosebumps, that sets the tone for the whole day. And you walk away with that feeling. And yes, you might not remember those exact words that were said, but you kind of get that, wow, that was a cool wedding. That was awesome. So it's really our role's facilitating that as well as getting you legally married, I guess.
So it's really pulling on the heartstrings or evoking some emotion from the stories that come from the bride side or the groom side or from the two partners in general.
Yeah, so I think, you know, previously when you used to get married in a church, there was kind of quite a format that was followed, for want of a better word. And nowadays with civil celebrants, that doesn't really exist. So I work with my couples and we get their stories, how they met, you know, what they first thought of each other, how they got engaged, things that are important to them, what they share. Like I've got one couple coming up who love to go hunting together. So they're having a Barry Crump reading in their wedding, which I'm not sure if he's a great role model, but so, you know, it's getting those things so that when that bride and groom are standing there, it's about them and it's about their story and it's about celebrating that, really.
So for people in that stage now where they've decided to get married and they're looking to plan their wedding, when should they start considering the wedding celebrant side of it? And what are the things that they can start researching on their own to kind of prepare themselves for the types of questions you were going to be asking anyway?
Yeah. So this is really interesting. So I've been a celebrant for give or take about 5 years. When I first started, it was common to book kind of maybe 6 to 12 months out. But I've been talking to friends in the industry recently and we're noticing 18 to 24 months, so 2 years out, which is a big commitment for me to put my hand up and say, yep, 2 years from now, I will keep your Saturday free and I will be there. So I think what's happening is brides couples are becoming more they're choosing their vendors and they'll go to their vendors and say, what dates have you got available? And they'll try and make that work rather than I've picked this date and I'm just going to get who's available on that date. So as soon as you know when you're going to get married, talk to your vendors, see when they're free. So, even if it's 2 years out, that's not too soon. And I think when it comes to picking a celebrant, you just need to get that feel that you match. And that goes both ways. You should feel really comfortable with your celebrant. Your celebrant should fit with you, fit with your day, and that whole vibe that you're going for. I mean, there's really practical things that you obviously ask about: availability, price, what that price includes, things like rehearsals, help with vows, how much they're going to tailor that ceremony to you, and just what kind of support they can perhaps offer. So ask lots of questions. We don't mind. We've been to lots of weddings before, so we can tell you. We love to share.
So with you, mentoring people through that process, mostly I would imagine for the first time, how do you make sure that you have all that information from that couple at hand, ready, so that you can share it at the right moments during their day? So my process is quite, I've developed a process that works to gather all of that information. So there's that kind of first contact, and they tell me a little bit about themselves and where they're getting married and what time. Then we always sit down and we have a catch up. Before that, I send them a series of questions. So that's things about, how did they meet? Describe your relationship in 3 words. What things do you love about your partner, or would you change? And that kind of starts to get that feeling of them, of their ceremony, of what they want. And then I sit down and I have 2 sets of questions. The first is my logistics, so things like, is the bride going to walk down the aisle? Who's going to walk down with her? Is anyone going to do any readings? Who's going to be their witnesses? And then the second set of questions I call them my Woman's Day questions. So they're the touchy-feely kind of, what do you love about each other? And once you sit down and you have a chat with people, you really get a feel. And getting close to 200 weddings, wow, you can kind of work out what people want and where they fit. And, some people are super into soulmates and love and, that really big romantic idea of a wedding. And other people are really a little bit more low-key, just, it's their best friend, it's their person they want to do life with, and that's kind of a celebration of that. So you kind of work out where people fit within that. So I kind of start gathering little bits of information from the start, a little bit more, sit down with them, put it together, write them a ceremony, and then that goes back to them before the wedding day. And often there's things like from their vows or from readings I've picked, and that, can kind of help guide you as well. So, you kind of gather it along the way, weave it together, give it to them, and then sit there and hope that they really love it, and then, make any changes. So you must have a really unique insight after marrying 200 people.
Yeah.
You've really got an insight, I would imagine, into what a successful couple looks like and what it takes to not just get married, but stay married.
I think there's the biggest thing that I've seen and that you can kind of tell is when it's about the marriage versus when it's about the wedding. And when it's about the marriage, the brides are as relaxed as possibly can be, and they don't care. They don't care if something goes wrong because they're just getting married to their best friend, and that's what it's about. Whereas the brides that get really stressed about something's gone wrong, or this is not the right colour, or these flowers haven't arrived, then you kind of start to wonder where their perspective is perhaps a little bit. Thankfully, it doesn't happen very often. But you do. You start to be able to kind of read people and how that works. So, yeah.
So what, I asked this to Shan Longley, who he works at the other side of, the end of life, because he's in the funeral director side. What makes for a great married life?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I've only been married 9 years, so still working it out. I think when I meet with couples and you can feel a sense of ease between them, and it's not necessarily that they don't disagree or they don't argue, but there's just a sense of being on the same team and heading in the same direction, and realizing that sometimes marriage is about, whose turn it is to take the rubbish out, or, who's getting up to the baby in the middle of the night, or who needs to, clean the shower. Because there's a really great quote that I love, and it's something along the lines of love is in the big moments as well as all of the moments in between. And I think that's what sums it up. So your wedding day is, that really big kind of pinnacle declaration of love, but it's all of those little decisions and bits of support and things that have happened along the way. So
nice. That's a good summary. I think it's the hardest part to get right in life. I certainly have found that. I'm still single now. At 39.
Let me know if you ever want to get married.
Well, I just, when I was researching for this interview, I looked at some of the graphs, and back, in the 60s and 70s, we were getting married about 70 people per thousand, which was quite high for the amount of population we had. And now it's down to like 10 per thousand. Yeah. So that's why I asked that question, is that because if you go to all the effort of getting married, you want to make sure it's going to last. Yeah, it's kind of hard to undo, so you kind of don't want to. Yeah. I often I wonder about societal issues in terms, or norms, not issues, societal norms in terms of, you think about those previous statistics in terms of living together. You didn't commonly live together until you were married. You didn't have children out of wedlock. So those were kind of two pressures that perhaps forced the hand sometimes in marriage. Whereas, now I don't know if I've married a couple who haven't lived together first. And, to have a baby outside of marriage is common. I marry a lot of, couples who have had their children first. They've done everything a bit backwards, had kids, bought a house and decided to get married. So, that's kind of changing the shape of those statistics, which perhaps also changes the shape of marriage in general and weddings. Because, suddenly you're doing it on your terms the way you want. Right, perhaps. So it's less about a rite of passage unlocking some future stages in your life, but more about a milestone that you decide to celebrate when you're ready. Yes, and I think a lot of couples, we talk, and that idea of, their marriage is their start of their marriage, but it's not the start of their relationship. It's not the start. It's more along the lines of celebrating what's gone before and looking forward to what's coming, and taking a moment to say, this is really awesome and I want to keep doing this with you together. So, maybe that's changing where those statistics kind of lie. And there's another interesting part to that where, although overall marriages are slowly going down, and it is slowly, there's, in terms of marketing speak, the addressable market has increased because now you can marry same-sex couples. Yes. From 2013. Have you seen that as like an increased blip, or is that something that is now trending upwards? What's your take on that? It's really interesting. So out of, say, almost 200 couples, I've married 2 same-sex couples, and both of them have been from Australia. So I'm not sure, and I don't know because it's not my community. So one of the things I've thought about, because the LGBT community hasn't been able to marry, it's not really part of their kind of community, if that makes sense. People who, came out when they were 16, 17, whatever, they didn't see, that they would be able to marry. So maybe that's not a norm. I don't know. I just wonder if, the kids now who are growing up, who always have this option available to them, if that will come through and maybe change things. Right. I'm not sure. I'm really, I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone, but I just wonder if that's it. The Australia thing is really interesting, that a lot of couples have got very good friends who are celebrants down in Queenstown, and they do a lot of same-sex weddings down there, and then mostly overseas couples, so predominantly Australian. And I wonder if it's almost a form of, not protest, that's not quite the right word, but what's the word I'm trying to say?
because they can't have it at home, they're deliberately coming here to do it to make a point, maybe? I'm not sure.
Oh, so there is no same-sex marriage in Australia at the moment?
No, I don't think so, or there's certainly not in some states. And what happens, because I don't know if you want this recorded, but this is really interesting, is what happens is they come to New Zealand, they get married, then they go home, and if they want to get a divorce, they can't get a divorce in their state in Australia because they don't recognise them as married. And to get a divorce in New Zealand, as I understand it, you have to be living apart in New Zealand for 2 years. So you get into this really weird grey area of they're not married legally in Australia yet they can't get divorced. If that makes sense.
That almost sounds like being stuck in the elevator.
It's kind of limbo.
Trying to get from reception to one of the upper floors. You might get to the upper floor, but you can't get back down again.
So it's really odd. Really odd.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I like about these interviews. They surface all sorts of different things that are peculiar to the industry.
Yeah.
Now, a question on how you got into it, because I read something on your website that said it's been a good day at work if I've made someone cry. Now, there's not many industries like that.
I should clarify, happy tears. No, so I do joke that if I've made someone cry, it's been a good day, and always happy tears. And I think it's just that emotion, that pure joy of being in that moment of two people saying we're gonna give this thing called life a go together and make that commitment, and that's pretty awesome and special. I always walk away from ceremonies feeling really honoured and privileged to be the one standing up there, and I joke sometimes that I use my superpowers because it almost feels like that. I get to take best friends and turn them into husband and wives, so that's awesome.
When did you decide to start doing this?
So this is a really awkward question because I've got no linear answer to it. But I guess growing up, I was always the kid that really looked forward to speech day at school. So I don't know, maybe that makes me...
That's unlike 83 other people I've had on the show so far.
I was always like, yes, this is really exciting. What am I going to talk about this year? So I never had that fear of public speaking, never was worried about getting up in front of people. And I did speech and drama at school and was completely comfortable in that kind of field. And then I went to university, so did a degree in something completely unrelated, but had a full sports scholarship for that. So I have no regrets. So I went down to Lincoln University and hung out there for 3 years. While I was there, I met my now husband. So he was studying wine, and we went and did some winemaking after university. I worked, sounds really random, but I worked in a coal mine using my degree, so an underground coal mine. I was the environmental officer there. Then we came back. We decided to get married, and I just remember ringing around celebrants, and this was the day that you had to, get the white pages out and go through and ring up, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, they sound so just boring and unenthused by the fact that I'm getting married, which I'm quite excited about. And I remember our celebrant, the first thing she kind of said to me was, you do realise I have bright red hair, don't you? And I said, yeah, I think Mum told me that. And she's like, oh, well, if you're fine with that, that's cool. Yep, I'll marry you. And so we had her, and she was just fantastic. She was excited and positive, and I just thought, that's really cool. So that kind of, we had that experience, and that kind of, stuck in my mind, I guess. And then we went overseas and made wine and travelled, and then we came back to the Hawke's Bay. And I just remember I was standing at work one day and I kind of thought, oh yeah, that's right, I was going to be a marriage celebrant. So I looked into it and applied, and it's quite an interesting process to apply. A lot of people think, like it's online, you can just kind of fill in a form and you can marry your friends, but it's actually quite involved, and it's changed to be more so since I got appointed. So you have to get 4 letters of support. You have to have a police check. You have to do things like a Real Me account. You have to have an interview with the registrar. You have to fill in a series of questions. You have to put together almost like an essay to say why there's a need for another celebrant. So basically every celebrant who applies has to show that there's a need within a specific community for you. So whether or not you might speak another language or sign language, or you can just service a part that may not be otherwise, looked after. So it's pretty funny. So I got interviewed and they kind of came to my point of, what's your difference? And I said, well, couples getting married nowadays, they don't look up celebrants in the phone book. So I'm going to have a website. I'm going to have Facebook. I'm going to have an email. And the registrar said, oh yeah, I've heard of the Facebook thing. And I was like, yep. So I've got a lot of people. So that was kind of my angle, I guess, was almost that digital side, and that I would be able to service quite a huge part of the market, which is either expats coming home to marry in the Hawke's Bay, or out-of-towners, whether they're domestic or international, coming to the Hawke's Bay, which is huge. And I don't think a lot of people realise how much money and business is brought in by these couples coming back. So that was my kind of angle. So I was perhaps a little bit ahead with that in terms of having a website. But I think, that's the norm now, to have those avenues. So, Facebook, Instagram, which I love, Pinterest, just, being on different directories and things like that. So
I am remembering with my interview with Tony McGregor from Magdalen Hill, she was very big on Pinterest and Facebook as well for putting together inspiration for brides and grooms for what they would want for their wedding. And what I noticed from on your website, and just scurrying into one of the links, was on your Pinterest boards, you have not just beautiful photos and imagery, but there's a board there for wedding vows and another one for scripts of ideas, which I think is fantastic, right? Because you're helping solve the whole problem for your customer. Yeah.
And, I sit down with these couples and I kind of say to them, what is it you want to do? What is it, you're thinking of? And generally their answers are, oh, we don't know, we've never done this before. And so there's no point of reference for a lot of people. They might have been to, a cousin's wedding or a friend's wedding, but until they actually stop and think about it, you really don't know. Do you know what I mean? Maybe they know they want to write their own vows and they'll have some rings in there, but there's so many other things that you can put in your ceremony that are just amazing. So, you have to have 2 witnesses to sign paperwork. So it was actually at Tony's wedding. We drew 2 names out of the hat and they were the witnesses, and that was awesome. We've had musical instruments at the end, so when people walked out there was maracas and tambourines and everything, and that was just so much fun. Games of rock, paper, scissors before you do your vows to pick who's going to go first. So just, just really fun stuff, and so that you can enjoy the moment. And then I think everyone has a good laugh and everyone relaxes, and then, it's just that enjoyment.
See, that makes me want to get married. Because that actually sounds like fun.
It should be.
Not just being in a penguin suit, sweating in a church somewhere.
Nervously.
For 3 hours.
No, exactly. There's so much fun you can have with it. So, a good celebrant will guide you through that kind of stuff. And, there's things either side of the ceremony, like I've had couples who they have a cocktail hour before the ceremony starts. So, everyone's had a drink, a bit of a loosener, a bit of a chat to whoever else is around, and so you sit down and you enjoy it. Or I've had couples who they've bussed their guests to the venue, and they've had like icebreaker games on the bus, which sounds a bit nerdy, but it's actually really funny if everyone gets into the spirit of it. So there's just the ability to personalise a ceremony is huge, and you don't have to just go with option A, B or C, and I think that's perhaps what a lot of people think you do. So
with that personalisation, you must have a pretty good understanding of who does what in the community to put a wedding on.
Yeah.
Who are your key partners or venues, or can you kind of just go anywhere with anyone?
It's really interesting. So I can go anywhere with anyone, and I do. And I mean, I have done weddings from next to nothing spent. So in the front yard, and they got chickens and buns from the supermarket, and they didn't drink, so they said, bugger it, you guys can bring your own, and BYO. So, they would have spent very little, but it was amazing. It was a beautiful ceremony because their friends were all there for the right reasons. They were getting married because they wanted to be married, and it was just so much fun. 2 weddings that I've done up at, really premium venues like Cape Kidnappers, the farm up there, and, 13 guests, but spends of 60, 70,000. So, yep, I can do, the whole range of it. I do tend to find that I cross over a lot with the same people, and I think that's maybe because we're kind of, in the same, not in the same marketplace, but the brides are kind of wanting the same thing. So they'll go to people like Tony for flowers, different photographers, because they can offer that personal kind of style and it kind of fits, if that makes sense. So in terms of partnerships, I guess along my journey, getting to know the venues has been really, really great. There's some fantastic people out there at venues, and if I know who's at the venue, and something starts to go a little bit wobbly, or a bride gets a little bit nervous, or a groom, is, a little bit uncomfortable, or something's happened, mum's late, or the music invariably stops working, it's good because I've got that partnership and we know how each other works, and you can kind of smooth a lot of things over and you don't leave each other hanging, if that makes sense. So
that does make sense. I remember going to a friend's wedding only at university, so we were like first or second year, and the music went wrong because it was a triple stack CD player. Went around to Violent Femmes while she was walking up the aisle.
That's awesome.
And then the celebrant, instead of just doing the wedding vows, was talking about a plane and the wings being a woman. And it went sideways really quick, and there was no one to pull it back.
Yeah, but then that thing, it goes sideways really quickly, and then you're sitting there going, what are they talking about? And then you go from, what are they talking about, to, oh, look, that's such and such sitting over there, to like, oh, I wonder how much longer till we can have a drink. And honestly, it does. And, that's what you want to avoid. I mean, if you can have a really great ceremony, everyone will kind of be in that moment, and that kind of, that feeling of love in the room is amazing. So to get back to your question, venues, really great. The functions managers there, and photographers as well. Because I guess in that moment when that ceremony's happening, you've basically got myself, or your celebrant, your photographer, and your event planner, if you've got one at your venue. So, that's the kind of 3 people that are going to keep it all together and running smoothly. And if you can get all of those parts working really well together, it makes it a lot more cohesive and just flows. And so there's some fantastic photographers out there, and they kind of know how I work, I know how they work, so they know that I'm going to stand to the side when, they do their first kiss. I know where they're going to be and things like that. So in that, for me, those things don't overly help me as an individual, but they help me to give a better service, a better product, for want of a better word, to my couples. So my brides and grooms go away on that high of thinking, wow, that was amazing, rather than, oh, great, the music stuffed up and such forgot the rings, and, there wasn't enough seats. So, it's about all coming together to provide that day. Because I think if you ask most vendors that are in the wedding field, they just want their couples to just have that special day, regardless of everything else. We kind of will bend over backwards a lot of the time to make sure that happens, because we know how important it is and how excited they are. So yeah, that's key.
And I think that's reflected in just how many couples come to Hawke's Bay to get married. There's a huge amount, particularly over the
it's
summer.
Amazing. I mean, I would probably say almost 70% of my couples are from out of town, whether they grew up here, or one of them grew up here. But I think the quality of the vendors we have in Hawke's Bay is phenomenal, like world class, without a doubt. You look at, the hair, the makeup, the photographers, the flowers, it's just exceptional. And for a province, it's really interesting that this has come about. I think a lot of it, perhaps initially it's driven by the weather. So people think, oh, we'll go to the Hawke's Bay and get married because the weather's good in Hawke's Bay. Whether it is or not is another thing, but they like to think so. So that's, that first kind of encouragement. And then they look at our venues here, and I think we've got some phenomenal venues, which is perhaps a little bit off the back of the wine industry, because we have such beautiful wineries, and then that kind of helps with kind of luxury accommodation, and it all kind of has a trickle-down effect in terms of weddings. And I mean, the food and booze that you can get here is phenomenal compared to other places that you'd be paying the same thing for. So what's that saying? A rising tide lifts all boats. So I think that's where we are.
It is. It's one of the key things in tourism in Hawke's Bay is wedding tourism.
And I think it is huge, because if you think, an average size wedding, maybe 80 to 100 people. So if you're bringing in an out-of-town wedding, that's, 100 beds, food, meals, accommodation. Maybe they'll go and do, some winery cellar doors the day beforehand, or, they all kind of go out for lunch the next day. So, there is a spend there, and I think it's maybe a little bit untapped. Maybe we could be marketing cohesively a little bit more outside of the Bay. I don't know.
I think so. I think there's a lot of, as you said, there's a lot of individual vendors.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to market to a larger group outside of a region, it makes sense to band together. Yeah,
because for myself, to go and spend that money on advertising outside of Hawke's Bay doesn't make sense in terms of what I bring together, what I bring in, what that would pay off would be. But, if you, and I think it's about showing couples that we've got everything here. You don't need to go outside, and you'll get, a world-class wedding here.
Well, hopefully this interview goes some way to raising your already large profile online.
Oh, thank you.
Through the 200 weddings you've done, because this will give you a couple of extra
wins
for SEO. And
perfect.
You can embed this and do whatever you need with it. I think that's all the questions I have got, unless there's anything else you'd like me to cover, Nichola. Is there anything I haven't
No,
asked?
That's quite good. I guess the only thing is I've got another project, because I've always got projects, but I'm starting up a wedding podcast.
Awesome.
With a very good friend of mine.
Brilliant.
So if you wanted to ask about that would be brilliant.
Talk about it. So what's it going to be about?
Okay, so I've got a very good friend of mine, Megan Banks, who she is ex-radio and has a media background. So her and I became friends at Coffee Group with our two boys that are the same age, and I encouraged, I'm not quite too sure what word, into getting her into Celebrant too. So she's also a registered Celebrant. So one of the kind of things I guess we've been talking about is that transfer of information and knowledge to couples about not just Celebrant type stuff, but also wedding. So she had the bright idea of doing a podcast. So we've got the One White Day podcast. So if you go to onewhiteday.co.nz, it is all there, and we should be on iTunes as well, hopefully. So that's a series that we've put together. So there's a little bit about us, kind of every third or fourth episode. There's kind of ceremony stuff or general celebrant wedding chat, and then we interview a series of guests as well. So the idea is that brides, couples, whoever can sit down and have a listen. They get to hear from some fantastic people a little bit about them, their journey, and then they give tips, tricks, how-tos, insights into their kind of field. So we've got Tony from Magdalen Hill. We've also got Jacinda Esu from The Pretty Little Details. So she's a planner and a cake maker coming up. So just to really give brides, couples, whoever, just an idea about what's out there, what they should ask, and help get that information going and, really help with their experience. So
that is a really smart move of yours, Nichola, because a lot of what your role is on the day is speaking.
Yeah.
So podcast is naturally playing to your strengths. And also because of the speaking on the day is about evoking emotion and getting people to laugh or have happy tears, then by doing a podcast, it evokes those same emotions.
Yeah.
Just like radio used to. And on top of that, any bride or groom, they're super busy.
Yeah.
So this is a dual activity.
Yes,
they can listen and go to the gym or do the dishes or, travel to work, all those things.
Podcasts are great for that. I really enjoy that. You can kind of embed them in your life in different ways rather than, if you're a bride and Pinterest is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but that is a total rabbit hole for a bride. Like, you go down there and you're not coming back for hours. I have meetings with couples and the poor groom is sitting there and he's like, oh yeah, she went on Pinterest. And I was like, 5 days later she reappeared and he's like, yeah. It's fantastic, but it's that total kind of ability to do multi activities at the same time.
Which episode are you up to?
So we're just starting. So we're up to episode 4. So so we've got a bit of a backlog because it's a little bit tricky because we're still at the very end of wedding season. I think we've got about another month to go for most people. So it's probably going to be that winter time when we kind of really start getting through some more. But it's all there. So.
Well, I'm glad someone else is doing a podcast based in Hawke's Bay, and I'll make sure that in the notes for this one, there is a link through to your podcast.
Awesome.
So anyone who has listened to this and wants to subscribe to the onewhiteday.co.nz, they can pick it up and start listening to your first 4 episodes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for your time.
Pat.
If you like this episode, remember to subscribe for free on iTunes. Simply search for The Ryan Marketing Show in the iTunes Store.